Welcome to JHart Modelworks. In update 1 for the Porsche 356 Cabriolet by Fujimi, we look at the chassis and front suspension, as well as the beginnings of work on the body. Welcome to my workbench. Let's get started. Alright guys and gals, we are going to start with the chassis. As I said in the unboxing, this is an incredibly complex kit. You pretty much start with a panel that's like just this panel with these supports and the bottom of this tub that goes up into this seat area. All the rest of this is built part by part, added in. You add in the sides, you build this back frame, the side supports, the suspension. This entire front section is piece by piece. So you really want to dry fit repeatedly. I would suggest that you dry fit all the pieces before you paint them to make sure you understand how they fit. Then after you paint them, you dry fit them again to make sure that the paint hasn't caused any issues with fitting the parts before you try to glue them. Tolerances can be very tight on some of the parts. I found some of the parts did not fit well after I painted them. And on top of that, once you start gluing things together, super glue can cause things to shift slightly. When I did it, I did the tub. I used the Tamiya Extra Thin to put the sides on, and then I started gluing pieces on afterwards, but I wanted to at least get these sides in so that I was sure I had them and that they would hold properly. Almost everything in this chassis is supposed to be semi-gloss black, with the exception of the interior that they want you to paint a really dark blue. Everyone knows that I'm not real good at following instructions for paint. So I went with some flat aluminum for the suspension, and for these, looks like these are frame supports for mounting the body to the frame in the real car. I did the 50-50 mix again with the Ferrari beige from Zero Paints and the saddle tan to get this kind of a peanut butter color interior. So the shocks I did with some Zero Paints Candy Electric Blue, but I did it over just the gray primer instead of a metallic, so it doesn't come out all shiny metallic, but it comes out just a little lighter because I've seen pictures of the original shocks and they're a dark blue. And Tamiya's regular blue I think would just be a little too dark, so I went ahead and did them just a little lighter using that candy blue over gray. The wheels themselves are supposed to articulate. They're mounted loose so that they will articulate. That being said, if you were just to try to articulate these just one wheel at a time, because that cross arm is bent by design, it's not warped or anything, it's just the way it's shaped is in a bend, so that whole part is not very structurally stable. So if you were to try and articulate this too much, or try just articulating by doing just one wheel, I really think you're going to end up snapping that in half. Speaking of snapping some things in half, the lower sway bar was very badly warped and damaged. It looked like this. And then when I took it off of the sprue, it snapped in half instantly, leaving me with pieces. So what I ended up doing was I painted the individual pieces. I trimmed off the center pieces for the bar that's supposed to go across the center, and after painting them I glued them in place, and then I just used some plastic styrene rod and I just painted it up and then cut it to fit, and it looks, I have a hard time, I know where it's cut, but other than that I would have a hard time even telling that it was damaged to begin with. So I think I replaced that pretty well. The steering column, which is this piece right here, the instructions on mounting that are incredibly vague. That's what they show you for the part, but the part does not look like this at all. The part looks like this, and it's important that you put it in at the right angle. You want that steering column to be at the top of the part, and then the rest of that to be underneath like this, because if you put it in with that steering column towards the bottom of that part, then it's going to get in the way with this cross arm for one, and it's going to tilt the steering column up too high, which is going to put an odd angle on your steering wheel. So if you do this kit, make sure you get that in the right order, and that's the direction you should be looking at. So we have the battery detail painted, and after detail painting up the battery, I went ahead and wired it up using some 28 gauge red and black electrical wire, and then I just kind of bored a hole out in the bottom of that chassis and ran the wire back. Kind of add a little bit of detail. There's not a lot of detail I can add on this kit, because every time I think of adding something, there is already a part in the kit for everything I think to add. So I went ahead and flocked the interior, and I did that before I added any of this in to the structure. I wanted to get that flocked and out of the way. I used some Model Masters Anthracite Gray, which I still have a little bit left, and then added in my gray flocking. I think that gray carpet is going to go real well with the tan seats and the tan leather. The pedals are also supposed to be semi-gloss black. I painted those just with some I think that's sparkling silver. Yeah, that's LP48 sparkling silver, which is the same thing I used on the steering box down there at the bottom. The instructions say to paint this a Tester's chrome trim silver, and I just went with LP48 so it would be a little shinier than all the aluminum around it. And then I just went and picked in some of these bolts using my trusty mechanical pencil method of just tapping a mechanical pencil into some silver paint and just hit those bolts real quick, and that kind of got some detail in there. And I used a little bit of Molotow chrome for the shift handle. Just to put a nice metallic sheen on that shifter arm, and a little dot on the top of the actual shift knob. All in all, the chassis is coming along nicely, and we're going to take a look at the body. Alright, if you remember from the unboxing, there are two indents on the rear quarter panels, and these indents are where the bumper goes in, but I want to get rid of them. So what I did was I started with some sprue goo, and all this is just some Tamiya extra thin cement with some extra bits of leftover sprue just chopped up and tossed in there and melted down. So when you put this stuff down onto whatever you're wanting to fill, to use it as a filler, you put it in there, and when the glue evaporates out, what you're left with is styrene plastic. So it's basically just melted plastic. It gives you a much more natural surface. And then after that, I sanded that as best as I could, and then I topped that off with some super glue, and then hit that super glue with some accelerator, and then just sanded that smooth, and that filled in the finer holes in that and really got me a good surface. I went ahead and also sanded off all the mold lines, got that cleaned up. I rescribed the panel lines, so the panel lines are pretty good. And then after filling in the panel lines here, I went ahead and just applied in some of the Tamiya panel line accent color. And I do this because sometimes I get out of the lines, and that panel line access color will go in. If I jump out of the lines and I scar up the body, it'll show me, and I can go fill that and clean that up. So I've got nice clean panel lines. I also got rid of, there's a real sharp line. If you remember that picture, there's a real sharp line around this back edge, right along this bottom end, and I wanted to soften all that up. And then there's the side fenders. I started off by taping the body off just in case this didn't work out. I didn't want something permanently attached to the body. After taping off the body, I took some of the cardboard from the 928 box and I just taped it into these fender wells. After I taped that off and got that in place, I kind of drew out the line that I wanted, trimmed it up, put them back in there, and then I used some of the yellow and gray standard milliput, and I pressed that into place and tried to smooth that as much as I could, and then I let that cure, and then I sanded the crap out of them to get them into shape. And I almost didn't use them. I was looking at them and I was real concerned about the seam where they would connect to the body. I thought there would be a real bad seam line in there. I think I've got this mostly cleaned up to where there shouldn't be too much of a seam, but what I did, I finally just said, to heck with it, I want to do it, and you know, we learn more when we do things that are terrifying, honestly. I was like, I can play it safe, or I can really try and do it, and I just committed. So I glued these in to the body with some super glue, just some Bob Smith Maxi Cure is what I used. Then after gluing these in place on the rear fenders, I went ahead and applied just a thick bead of super glue around that seam, and then sanded it as smooth as I could get it, sprayed like a guide coat of primer, and sanded it and primered again and sanded it until I got rid of almost all the primer, so that when I do spray primer, it looks to be pretty smooth. Up here I could not really do that. I was a little concerned with how tight this gets in on this bit of detail here, and I didn't want to get super glue on that to a point that I couldn't, you know, cleanly put in some bare metal foil later. But I think I have this. The last time I sprayed a guide coat on these fenders, they looked pretty good. They didn't look too much like an obvious add-on. I'm trying to make it look natural as I can get it. I don't want it to look like a body kit, so I'm trying to get that as smooth as I can. So there's the fenders. I also got rid of the arms for these wing windows and rounded that off, so this looks much more like the Speedster windshield. In the process, that didn't quite break, but it tried to break. It's like partially broken through. So I have applied a tiny bit of super glue in there, but that's very weak. So as soon as I get paint and clear on here, I'm going to go in and get the glass in there to try and support that, because that really bothers me. That's got me seriously concerned. I don't want to put any more super glue in there, or I'm afraid the glass won't sit right. So I just got to be real careful with it. Also, while prepping the body, I've decided I really want to do a tonneau cover on this. So what I did was I used some tape and I masked off the area that I wanted the tonneau cover to sit in, and then I went ahead and put some tape on the other side as well, so I now have a pattern. I'm trying to decide how I want to do this. I could use like a canvas or some kind of a thick cloth, or I can try and find maybe some like 1mm thick leather or fake leather or something with a really fine grain on it that I might be able to shape. But I do have my template for that. I also went ahead and took some jewelry wire and made a wire frame. So if I do go ahead and do like a cloth, what I can do is just glue it to this frame and then set it over, which it would actually hold better once there's actually material on it. But I can just kind of put the cloth on that wire frame, and then I'll be able to just take it on and off. I don't want it to be permanent because I do want to be able to, you know, if I want to take it off, see the interior better. I think I'm going to take out one of the back seats maybe and put in a small roll bar, but I want the other one left in place, and I want to be able to see the interior, so I don't want it glued on permanently. So I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to do a tonneau cover for this as well. All in all, it's just about ready. The only thing I have left to do is I need to make some custom mirrors. I'm not happy with the shape of the mirrors on the original kit. They're a little oblong and they just don't look right to me. I mean, they're the correct mirrors. I think they're pretty much period mirrors. What I really wanted was some Talbot style fender mirrors like you see on the JDM cars, but the only ones that I found, I think they were like a couple of bucks, but I would have to pay like $20 in shipping to get it from Germany, and I'm like, no, not gonna happen. I'm not paying 20 bucks in shipping for a $2 resin part. So what I'm planning on doing is taking a small bit of probably jewelry wire or something to make an arm, and then bend that arm out, and then I'll use some plastic, either some sprue or something, to try and make a mirror. It won't look perfect, but it should look pretty good, and then I'm gonna need to drill those in to make sure that I've got them in the right places. And then once I have those holes drilled, then I will go ahead and I will start doing my primer and whatnot. I'm gonna do the black primer again with the Arena Red, the Porsche Arena Red paint, because I still have a bottle and a half of that from before on the 928, and we'll move on from there. Next steps on the instructions look to be the interior. So I think next week I'm going to go ahead and focus on that, and we will see you next week for the next update. If you like the video, please go ahead and click that like button. If you're not a subscriber to the channel and you want to see the update videos, make sure you click the subscribe button and click that bell icon so you can be notified when I do release the next videos. Feel free to leave me any kind of comments or feedback in the comments section below. I love interacting with you guys as much as I can. And as always, guys, thank you for watching. Keep modeling and have a great day.